Welcome to the Hive Online on Wednesday, the 6th of November. I'm not going to mention what's happening in the United States this morning because that's going to make me depressed. But it is a nice autumnal day where I am in the Midlands, so we'll just focus on that and hope that everybody is well. At the Hive Online, we discuss data and its challenges and how it can be a positive. And today is no different. We have both challenges and positive news to come from Imran and how he's dealt with stuff. So I'm going to pass over to Imran.
Thank you so much, Claire, and thank you for inviting me. As I've said, I'm going to be talking about property information boxes and a recent challenge that I've had in line with my organisation in regards to property information boxes. So, property information boxes are a red-coloured box. It's a legal requirement since January 2023 in England. They're required for new builds over 11 metres and existing buildings over 18 metres, and you have to have these installed. So I was approached by my building safety team with regards to this new change in legislation. Building safety team allocated a couple of colleagues who were given the task to deal with the information that was going to be included within these boxes. And the building safety team colleagues proposed information that would identify vulnerable persons in the event of a fire to support evacuation and rescue, and sent me quite a brief email with regards to the information that they wanted to include, also telling me that the information would be in a metal box with a padlock. So as you can see, that they were proposing name, flat number, floor, risk factor, telephone number, and I think there's a couple of other bits of information. After sort of absorbing that information and the proposal of the information that they wanted to include, I sort of went over it and replied and thanked the department for the proposal and sharing of that information, because it's really important that those departments engage with the data protection officer, early on in the process. However, I expressed concerns over the safety of the proposed personal information in the box, which could be accessed if it was broken into. These PIBs, they're made from a very thin metal. They're a bit like these external letter boxes you might see, and so if somebody really wanted to get into it, they could do very quickly. And also, from my perspective, what could happen if the information that was accessed and the impact it would have on those vulnerable persons. Another point I made was how and when would the information be updated? Because the proposed information you're proposing, if it's out of date, that would raise lots of issues in itself. So my advice initially was to hold on proceeding with the proposal until there could be some clarity on what actual information is to be included. I also asked to see the fire safety regulations 2022 and the details of the local fire safety office, simply because they were being quoted to me as, this needs to be done in line with the certain legislation and the local fire office. So I went away and had a look at the legislation and the information, and found out that actually the information that needs to be included is some A3 floor plans with a generic layout of the building, a simple fire strategy plan, again in A3 size to include floor layouts, and an elevation drawing depicting the floors and flats, numbering regime. For me, the most important was the list of vulnerable people, locations and evacuation plans, an evacuation strategy for the building, risks present, including construction materials and external wall systems, access and facilities for firefighting, dry risers, FF lifts, FF shafts and hydrants, active and passive measures present, details of fire safety systems, fire alarms, sprinklers, smoke control, structural fire resistance, contact information for the managing agent, the landlord or the council, any unusual features, basements, tunnels, service utilities, isolation, and building continuity strategy. So a lot of information there, quite a lot of technical information, but it's sifting through to find out the information that was relevant to myself. So I looked through the actual legislation. I read through the legislation. I reached out to my kind team of DPOs. I reached out to Claire. I reached out to many other friends within our industry to just share my concerns and just get some independent opinions, which I'm really thankful, especially to Claire and others within our community who always give good advice and a shoulder to listen. So I reached out to the local fire officer as well, fire safety officer, found out that actually there is no legal requirement to put tenant information in the PIB. It's just recommended in terms of vulnerable people to help, fire officers in the event of an emergency. So initially I suggested a simple diagram with a key or a code to highlight vulnerabilities for fire and safety services without sharing personal information. So a fire officer could very quickly just look at the diagram and understand, how many persons could be in a certain building and would be able to concentrate on that specific flat if needed. However, I was met with some resistance. It wasn't really acceptable. The department insisted on using a template with information. They were adamant they wanted to proceed very quickly, lots of pressure being applied, quite a forceful really. So again, I sort of took time to just go back to the department, and try and educate them on actually, what our obligations are when it comes to protecting the personal data of our colleagues, of our tenants, sorry, and our responsibilities as an organisation. Involved the head of building safety as well in the conversations, who wasn't originally included, and again, had a very open conversation and explained that yes, we do need to put this information in. Yes, I'm here to help you, but let's work through this to gain a solution that will be the right solution moving forward for all parties as well as the organisation. So I started to work through a template and a solution that would not only protect our tenants' personal data, but also would be very good for a fire safety officer or a firefighter in an emergency. And also suggested that this is reviewed with the local fire safety officer after 3 months to see how it's being received. I was told that we do have incidents of fire, on a monthly basis, and so it's not uncommon to have an incident, and so that 3-month period would be enough to understand how the fire safety officer is receiving our information, and if there's anything else we could do to improve that to help them as well. So this is the proposed solution I came back with, since they were not interested in going with a diagram. And as you can see, it's laid out quite simply in some colours, which I'll explain, but simply the name of the scheme, the date it was reviewed, and evacuation strategy. It lists categories of individuals who were vulnerable in the red, yellow and green there. And we've gone through each flat and put the flat number in, the number of persons that are vulnerable, what floor the flat is on, the category of vulnerability, and the impairment that might be within that flat. And as you can see, quite quickly, a fire officer could look at it and understand how many people are in category 2, category 3 and category 1. And so once we'd worked through this solution and educated the department and the people that were involved, they agreed that this was the best way to move forward. So really, I've got some closing comments that initially that the proposal that was sent and that the forceful sort of nature, it can be daunting for DPOs because we're being met with challenge from departments who really don't understand how to protect personal data. They've got the best interests, and for them, they're proposing a solution that they feel is the best solution, but not necessarily in line with the obligations of us as data protection officers and the organisation. It's very difficult not to be disheartened because I think Claire will agree that when we had this conversation, I did feel quite frustrated. It was a new area for me that I'd never dealt with before, didn't know anything about. This PIB, didn't really know much about fire safety and regulation. And so, again, it's really important that we reach out for help, and having that, friendship circle of other DPOs, and certainly Hive Online and Claire and Co. It is always good to just reach out to get a second opinion and just really see how we can move forward. One thing I've actually learned within this example is that you should really look at the legislation. I was being quoted all types of legislation, by the department that we must do this and we must do that, and this is the information and the legislation that we're being quoted. But actually, when you go through and read the fine print and speak to others, you'll actually find out that most of the time it will actually tell you what is needed. But those departments necessarily haven't actually gone and read that legislation or understand it. They're just quoting it. And finally, I will say that data protection is a culture change and a very long journey, and it's a marathon and not a sprint, and so we've just got to continuously educate our colleagues and our departments, and to always remain positive moving forward when it comes to protecting personal data. And that is the end of a very short presentation there. So hope that's all right, Claire.
Thank you so much, Imran. That was a whistle-stop tour of what I know. That makes it sound really quick and short, but I know that this was over many, many weeks.
Yes.
And very many frustrating conversations and all the rest of it. And thank you for packaging it up so nicely for us. We've got a couple of questions in the chat.
Yeah.
Just going to pop you on mute, Chris. So we've got a couple of questions in the chat, which I'll go through, and then I'm going to do a couple of polls just to get a feel for what challenges and so on people in the room are dealing with. Where's that chat gone? Here we go. So we were just double checking the date that you said. So it was January 23, wasn't it, for England?
Yes, I think the date was the 22nd or 23rd of January 2023 when it came into England.
And somebody was asking, do you know if it's legislation in Scotland as well? I'm guessing you didn't look that up because you're not in Scotland.
Very good question, and absolutely I didn't, but I'd be more than happy to go away and have a look and come back.
Thank you so much. Lots of people saying very useful. Really liked your template. We've got a question. Am I right in thinking this is for high-rise properties only? So at the beginning there was a height, wasn't there?
Yes. So it's 11 meters for new builds and 18 meters for existing ones. So yes, I think if we look at flats and high-rise buildings, yes.
Now, I must say here, before we get on to this couple of queries, Imran is not saying that this is the perfect solution. This is just moved on from where they wanted to be. And I think you've been very kind in what you said in your first slide, that they had been saying we must have name, and I think you've missed that date of birth. I think they wanted date of birth in there, I'm sure.
They did, yes, yeah.
Brilliant. So we think, 11 metres is about 5 stories, but we know it's height, not stories. But I was just trying to get my head around that, kind of what that might look like. So we think 2 or 3 stories. No, sorry, we think 3 or 4 stories above is what we're thinking. And Google says 7 stories is 18 metres. So we are looking at 5 or 7, we think. Brilliant. Thank you to the Googlers. But yes, we have moved on a lot from where you were. So we're not saying this is the perfect solution. I think they wanted date of birth, they wanted full names, they wanted like their full diagnosis and everything, didn't they?
Yeah, they wanted gender, lots of information.
Yeah. So that brings us on to a couple of really good challenging questions here. So I just wanted to preface that with this will kind of help us maybe take it to the next stage. The question is, why are we using the impairment instead of the action the fire brigade needs to take? So that is a really good question, because that's something that I'm constantly battling with myself.
Yes. So when I went back to the department, considering the information they wanted originally and the challenge that I was getting, it was to try and understand, okay, we're talking about vulnerabilities, then, if you put yourself in the position of a fire officer, what information would you want at the time of making a very quick decision in an emergency, and which areas would you need to concentrate on? And once we'd sort of worked through the proposed solution, that's where the department said, okay, well, we want to make sure the fire officer would know if somebody was, for example, deaf, or if somebody was blind. And from my perspective, I wanted to work with the department in terms of a compromise, because it was very, very challenging to get them to that position.
Even to where you got them,
to where I got them to, because initially they weren't. It was quite a regimental sort of attitude, as you're aware. It was like, this is what we're going to do. At one point, I was told, well, we have to do this, whether you like it or not. And I was sort of responding back and saying, well, I do want to do this. I want to work with you, but also I'm trying to explain to you, where we are in terms of me as a data protection officer. And yes, I certainly want to work with you, and I'm certainly not saying that we should not be doing this, but I think your approach and your initial proposal isn't in the best interests of neither our tenants or our organisation. So yeah, sorry.
I was going to say, you spoke to the fire officer as well, didn't you?
I did, yeah. I spoke to the fire officer. Fire officer said, again, very similar to the initial comments that I made, was that, in a position like that where, there's a fire, unfortunately, people are at risk, very quickly the fire officer needs to know, if somebody is deaf or if somebody is blind, and emphasis would be given, because, for example, if it's a deaf person, they wouldn't be hearing. And so for the fire safety teams, it goes, if you think, there would be many fire officers who are then given the role of, right, okay, you're going to look at this floor, you're going to look at that floor. He goes, then we would have teams who go, right, okay, this is the priority for you. You need to go and concentrate on these 4 flats, and other set of fire officers on a different floor. So again, it was a compromise that was made, that, okay, yeah, we understand. Considering you want to put an impairment in compared to where you wanted to put a name, date of birth, and telephone number, was a very big compromise. And so we went with that. So.
And actually, I have to say, in this case, I think it is a shorthand to the fire brigade knowing what to do. Because thinking about deaf, how would you describe the action to take without mentioning deaf? Same for blind, and I noticed you had agoraphobic there as well. How would you mention the action that you want to take without saying agoraphobic? Whereas that is a shorthand to people who are very highly trained and know what they're doing, and they've dealt with people in those circumstances. I think actually in this case it is a good shorthand. But that does bring us on to the next question. What lawful basis are you relying on, especially when the tenant is single household?
So the lawful basis would simply be that it's in terms of their best interests from a health and safety perspective to preserve life, and our ongoing obligation to protect you as a tenant in our properties.
Yeah, I think you've definitely oh, sorry. So we've got that questioner said that wanted to add it's not a challenge seeking understanding to see how I can use the approach taken. Sorry, I didn't mean to take it like that, but I wanted to give the whole picture. And it's useful to have these questions and to bounce these around, because these are the exact same questions we were asking, weren't they? As we were. I think I sent an email out to a few of you who were probably on the call today saying, have you come up against this as well, and how are you dealing with it? So it really was a team effort.
Yes. Yeah.
Somebody, I can't remember who it was, but somebody did give us really useful pointer towards the exact piece of legislation, because that's such a key point that you said in your slides as well, Imran, that they'll go, oh yeah, but the law says we have to do, and they're just translating what they've heard from someone else, and we've got to go back to the source. Absolutely. Another really, really useful question: would we need to record this processing on the data processing record, so the records of processing the ROPA, and update the privacy notice?
Yes, we would.
Yeah.
That's quite simply yes.
Yeah. Sorry, just wanting to clarify the lawful basis. We're saying lawful obligations, aren't we? Legal obligations under health and safety.
Yes.
Yeah. At the time of an actual incident happening, you can rely on vital interests. Sorry, somebody's just put vital interests, but that's more when it's an emergency and you might pick up the phone and say, this person needs whatever. But for putting the information in the property information boxes, we're talking about legal obligation. For safety purposes. Social protection and all the rest of it. And also, I suppose it kind of bleeds into substantial public interest as well, safeguarding. So vital interest is in the emergencies. Okie doke. I'm going to ask, I think I've picked up the questions. Yes, I think so. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to pop a couple of quick polls up. So we have got, I've lost how many people. We've got 24 people, so 22 plus myself and Imran in the room today. And so we've got somebody just confirming yes to put it in the ROPA and yes to put it in the privacy notices, definitely. And I'd say as well, and I think you have done this, haven't you? A bit of a comms activity, a bit of a little mini project to tell people in those homes that this is happening. You know, you're not just sticking it in the privacy notice and hoping nobody realises.
No. Some comms had actually gone out. This is going back to, I think, June or July when we spoke and we came up with the resolution. Some comms was done following that, just so that tenants would be aware as well. And I think it is due for review at the end of this month. So I'd be more than happy to come back and just give you a follow-up as to how things are going, and what the comments from the fire safety officer was, and also anybody else that's been involved in any recent incidents, and just to see how it's been received. So
that would be brilliant. Thank you. So I'm just going to pop up a yes or no. It's a tick or a cross, instant poll. Is this something that you are dealing with? Do you have do your organisations have these buildings that are affected by the property information box requirements? Names won't be recorded, we'll just see the results. So just hit the tick if you do have them, cross if you don't, and we'll get a feel for in the room. So 42%. Oh, so some of you, a bot is stopping you. Your IT, or it is a bot, so it's been disabled. So most of you aren't having to deal with this at the moment, so you can just all sit back and feel relieved. But I still think it's really, really useful the way that Imran has approached this, because who among us can say we've never come up with an issue with any of our teams? So I won't ask another one then, because I can see a few of you have had it. But would anyone like to share how you are getting on. Have you had issues? So it is useful to know, even if it doesn't affect you currently. So I mean, you may start building high rises, but I just love the way that Imran approached it. This is interesting. It's still possible that PIBs could be made mandatory for commercial premises, which will interface with personal emergency evacuation plans in the workplace. Shall I turn the recording off? I feel like people are being a little bit shy today. I don't know if it's because we're all depressed about the US news, but I'm going to turn the recording off this time at this point.